Joining us now live to discuss the situation in Iran is Christine Balling. She's a foreign policy analyst and the senior vice president for professional affiliations at the Institute of World Politics. Thanks for joining us this morning, Christine. What's your initial thoughts and reactions to the Pentagon briefing this morning?
Well, thank you for having me. The clear message is that this time around, the United States is going unapologetically to meet our objectives. President Trump and then Secretary of War Pete Hegseth just made it very, very clear that despite all of our diplomatic efforts, the Iranian government was unwilling to negotiate, and therefore, in the interest of peace in the region and eradicating what has been one of the greatest malevolent forces in the world for decades, the United States simply, we had no choice. And President Trump obviously continues to prove himself a president who takes action. So I think that this particular news conference leaves very little doubt as to how strong of a resolve this administration has when it comes to defeating this Islamic caliphate once and for all.
Yeah, you bring up the secretary's words. He had many interesting quotes, one of them being, the best defense is offense, and we're no longer defenders, we're warriors. What is your assessment as we go into day 3 of this operation thus far?
Well, first of all, obviously we've already suffered, I think, four U.S. casualties, which is heartbreaking. But again, this underscores something which I think the American people, we often forget, is the nature of the sacrifice of our men and women who sign up to serve for our armed forces. So when a president and when a secretary of war, secretary of state makes this decision, it's a profound decision where they have balanced what they feel is in the good of our nation, the good of the world, versus lives, American lives, that can be lost in the process. Now, obviously, given the scope of the operations thus far, it is fortunate that no more American lives have been lost so far. But that is not to say that we won't lose more brave women and men in this effort.
Yes, Christine, and as we heard the secretary say, we don't give to the media and the enemy our plans. When he was asked about timing, the question from the media did come in response to President Trump's comments that it could take 5 weeks. What is your thought around the timing of the operation?
Well, the timing, in terms of it being launched during Ramadan and, of course, during the Sabbath, with regard to the Israeli participation, having that happen in the daytime, as many have suggested, was a crucial advantage in terms of of surprise. But I also think that in terms of the timing writ large with this administration, that President Trump is making it clear that whether it be Iran, whether it be Venezuela, whether it be another country who's been operating against our efforts, he is not wasting time. And so I think that all of the world's bad actors who are hell-bent in lessening the freedom around the world and certainly trying to defeat the United States, I would imagine they've taken notice, because the time frame is now. The time frame is not the future. The time frame for this decisive military action, wherever it would be, is clearly now.
Yes, and Christine, there are a lot of potential scenarios as it relates to what a regime change or transition could look like. In Venezuela, the president probably could have helped to install someone outside of the pre-existing regime, but chose not to do that. In this case, he is calling on the Iranian people to take back their country. Those were essentially his words. But depending on should they lay down their arms, the scenario could change on the ground very quickly. What might a transition look like to something that's, they had elections, of course, but there was always above the elected president the supreme leader. So now if they move to a truly republic-style government, what might that transition look like?
Well, there's the challenge. I would imagine that unless the form of government changes away from an Islamic caliphate, which requires the country to operate under Sharia law, significant changes will not come about. So that's the key in terms of whether, for example, the upper members of the Revolutionary Guard, those who are remaining, are they willing to consider a different form of government? So the other thing one would hope is that the United States and Israel, the intelligence folks, have already determined who is already in place on the ground, who is likely to take the reins or at least facilitate others to take the reins. I'm not sure about the prince who has been very vocal on the airwaves recently. But that, of course, is part of the plan that the United States cannot talk about openly at the moment. That, I would imagine, it's a very delicate operation and relies largely on our intelligence capabilities.
And Christine, there are a lot of interconnected elements to this conflict and the wider components as well. It started out with just Israel and the U.S., but in the Iranian response, they basically shot missiles at all of their neighbors. What are you looking at over the next 24 hours to understand what's actually taking place and what the road to some other type of post-theocracy could look like?
Well, for one thing, I'm actually, as many are, I was surprised that Iran chose to do that, because clearly what's already happening in the last 24 hours is various Arab states have come up and against the Iranian aggression, saying outright that, number one, they will defend themselves, and number two, they are now going along with United States efforts. Now, even though they are not saying anything directly about they are aligned with Israel, we all know that that's in the background. So, I mean, one thing I think that can come out of this is that the Abraham Accords, there will be another shot for those. I mean, that of course was the objective when at the October 7th attack, was in response to the fact that it was the first time in the history of modern history that we were so close, thanks to the Trump administration's efforts to bring Israel into the fold, to establish long-term peace in the region. So I think that that's something that is, once again, very possible and in a much more permanent way, ironically, given the fact that Israel is attacking its neighbors in the region. Second, what we've seen, certainly Germany, the UK have come out, even though they're not necessarily supporting, they don't want to get into the game, as it were, offensively. The various European, NATO countries have made it known that they are going to support the U.S. in our efforts. So that's very significant, too. And frankly, this could also smooth over the recent tensions between the United States and NATO with regard to Greenland, or just generally speaking, even before the Greenland issue came up.
Yeah, and I want to get your view on, since you're talking about those regional aspects, Russia and Iran both selling lots of oil to China, Russia not able to really take any material steps toward peace, Russia, a major ally of Iran. What's coming out of Russia? What are they saying? How are they reacting to these last 3 days?
Well, on X, of course, the various members of the government are, of course, outraged at the aggression and so forth. There's nothing new. What speaks volumes, to use that cliche, is the fact that they have done nothing. They can't do anything. And frankly, that was actually evident when we took out Maduro, because both Iran and Russia for years were supplying Venezuela with weapons. So suddenly for that also showed that neither of those nations were either willing or able to come to Venezuela's defense. And I think that this current conflict, when it comes to Russia, shows even more that I think that Russia would have done more than just trash talk, as one says, on X, if they in fact were able and willing to come to Iran's defense.
Yeah, and speaking of sort of rhetoric or trash talk, as we look at home, some Democrats have said that they're fully in support of this operation, Epic Fury, but Schumer is calling for an early return to D.C. where they can enact the War Powers Act, to restrict President Trump's ability to carry out the operation. What's your feeling about what will be happening in D.C. over the next day or so?
Well, no doubt that will continue. I have no doubt that the Democrats will continue to pursue that line of effort. I think it's futile. It's unfortunately, I think that's not in the nation's interest at this moment. Our enemies delight when we are divided, especially in this very important time. So it's a shame, but bottom line is I would say that's just domestic politics as usual, especially since we're looking at the midterm elections. So from a strictly somewhat cynical political point of view, I think the Democrats felt that they've got to speak out against this, looking towards the upcoming elections.
Well, so many angles to look at this from inside, from outside. Appreciate you exploring all of it with us. Christine Balling, thank you.
Thank you.